Yeah, forest and jungles are really bad for tanks. So don't definitely never ever bring tanks to a fight down here, because you will just hemorrhage tanks and your industry just will not be able to keep up with the attrition. Don't do it. Just don't do it. And likewise, when it's the muddy season in Russia, you'll notice that a lot of this area will start going brown, and that's a bad time. And if you're in a province which is brown, you'll start suffering. If you're moving through a province with brown, you'll start suffering massive attrition. It's like 70% attrition or something. It is kind of redonkulous. So it's actually a lot easier in this game to attack during the winter because the mud's gone. Which is a little bit weird, but if your troops are acclimatized for winter, you don't really suffer a penalty. Okay, so production. Based on the templates we have seen, we don't use artillery at all. Not a single gun. We don't use any support equipment, though we probably will. Again, talking about the fact that we want to get field hospitals early means that we're going to need support equipment and also motorized, which we don't have access to. We currently have no anti-air. We're going to have a phenomenal air force, so we're probably not even going to need anti-air, because if they're beating us in the skies, we are doing something wrong. So we're going to invest all 4 of our military factories into infantry equipment right now. That's all we're going to need. We have these massive blocks of units, and they're going to be expensive. Then taking a look at the ships, we can see which kind of ships are currently available. We have pretty decent light cruisers, and that's about it. So we might actually build Sydney class. What are they? So if we click on this button here, this is the create variant. This will actually show you what this variant has. And the way that ships are built is kind of different. You have this actual ship designer, and then you can choose where to place various modules. So this ship is using torpedoes. It does have, and this is what I was looking for, the float plane, which is a humongous bonus to surface detection. So these are recon ships. It has 2 sets of level 2 guns, which is pretty good. This ship will rip through early destroyers. It does have AA, level 2 AA. That's actually quite high level. No fire support, but that's okay. No sonar, but that's not invented yet. And level 2 engines, which is another thing that you really want to look at. So this is actually a very good light cruiser. We might want to build more of those. Early cruiser, that's a heavy cruiser. We can probably get rid of that. We can get rid of that. Once you have a variant, you can just create other types by doing this and then saving it. It's cheaper that way. So if you have like the base template and then something already built, you can usually just press this button, which is decommission, and that just removes it from your list. It just makes it easier to organize. Whereas we don't have any submarine variants designed, so we want to keep that around so we can actually build an early submarine if we choose to, or we can research better subs. But right now, let's take a look at this. This does have anti-submarine warfare. It does have torpedoes. It has an early gun. Has AA. So this is a pretty solid, not exceptional, not great in the same way that the Sydney class cruisers are good. But this is a solid destroyer, and we could build them quite cheaply. We can effectively get almost 4 destroyers in the time it takes us to build 1 light cruiser. But those light cruisers are that good that I think I might actually just order 2 sets. Oh, yeah, we'll just order a new light cruiser. We'll use any dockyards we get. And then these grey ones are basically saying if any more become available, like if we build more, then it will automatically assign them to this construction project. So it's going to take until the 25th of November 37. That will speed up once we get rid of like the Great Depression, which is a penalty to dockyard output. When we get more dockyards, which we'll probably need to because we're going to be fighting Japan. Yeah. Alright, and we had some people follow. Admiral Mac, thank you very much for the follow. And Reality Sucks, thank you very much for the follow as well. Very much appreciate that. Oh yes, I do need to change my stream title. Thank you for the reminder. There was a poll. There isn't anymore. Oh, they're cheesy. Cast angles at least. Somewhere in there, probably. Rip Mountain Blade? Absolutely not. Oh, I am so glad I had somebody requesting Mountain Blade. No, that's back tomorrow. Friday. Back on Friday. You can see the schedule in the schedule down below. This channel did do a lot of Hearts of Iron before, so everyone that was already here has been going, where's Hearts of Iron? Are you abandoning Hearts of Iron? No, I'm not abandoning either of them, as is proven by my schedule, which has both games in it. Can Australia do anything in this game? Anything as in, are they completely useless, or anything as in, can they go land, sea, or air? No to the first one, and yes to the, they can do pretty much anything. They're especially suited to mechanized warfare and air force. Australia's air force is scary. The only thing I'm abandoning is my sleep hours. I mean, playing Fallout 4 in my spare time on top of all of that. Yeah, didn't get to bed until 8 o'clock this morning. Oops. Anyway, right, the other thing that we do want to check is the officers that we have. So if we click on the army, and then we click on click to assign, this will show us a list of all of the generals that we have available. And the first thing I'm noticing is we don't actually have a field marshal. That's interesting, so we'll need to promote one. So we've got Leslie Morshead, who is good at attacking, fairly mediocre at defending. He's got very good planning. So remember earlier on I was talking about the max planning bonus? If we were Grand Battle Plan and had Leslie Morshead in charge of one of those armies, he would be very, very good at that. And he is kind of mediocre at logistics, which is a supply thing. This is incredibly important if you're fighting in Southeast Asia or if you're fighting in Africa. This one is generally very important, particularly for field marshals. This is good if you're on the defense, this is good if you're on the offense. So Leslie Morshead right here is actually looking to me to be an extremely good field marshal, probably. The other thing I'm noticing is very few of these guys actually have traits. So we do have an armor officer, which will mean we get extra experience leading tanks for Northcott, so he's probably going to be our armoured commander. We do have a Desert Fox in Horace Robertson. He's also got pretty good supply, so this guy, if we were going to be active in Africa, would be the guy we send. Alan Vasey, who is good in hills, so if we were fighting in hilly terrain, or if we were fighting defensively, then Vasey would be good for that. And then these three are just higher level, which basically just means they get more traits. Every time you level up, you get 3 points in random traits. They don't ever double up, so it'd be like offense, defense, and supply every time you level. So these guys will just have better stats, but then the lower ranked guys have the better traits. As you gain experience, you will get more traits. So the ones in the earned traits column, you get experience in these just by doing their job. So for example, infantry leader, as long as you have more than 80% infantry, you will gain infantry leader. And once you hit 1000, you get the infantry division defense bonus, and you unlock the ability to get infantry expert or ambusher. You don't need any other requisites, you just need infantry leader. And infantry expert is very strong because division attack is actually their damage done, it's not their ability to attack. Kind of wish they would change that header. So Leslie Morshead, one thing that we almost always want field marshals to get is organizer, so they can get logistics wizard. The fact that his supply is kind of poor is a bit concerning, but field marshals will provide these stats to everyone under their commands. The way you assign a field marshal is you click on an army, then you click on the bigger portrait to their left. Field marshals command army groups. So an army group can consist of up to 5 armies, then an army can consist of up to 24 troops. So what we'll probably end up doing is promoting Morshead to a field marshal, seeing as we don't start with one, then he would be in command of the army group. In fact, I bet you don't have a field marshal because they haven't updated it since Together for Victory, which was one of the first DLCs they released before field marshals were a thing. I bet that's true. And to promote this guy, it's going to cost us 30 command power. This is command power here. It just accrues over time. It accrues faster if you send out attaches, but otherwise it's just up over time. So once we have 30, we can make Morshead into a field marshal. In the meantime, we will want to have somebody else in charge of this army. This is almost certainly going to be a defensive army. I'm not expecting to do offensive operations, so we'll probably bring in Henry Winter. He's got very good defense skill. His main job is just going to be holding on to ports. Then the next thing we're going to do is use the area defense button. This basically just says, I want you to defend these areas to the best of your ability. And we're just going to highlight... I'm not going to bother with those. In fact, I'm not even going to bother with that. I'll leave that to the Dutch. We're just going to defend Australia. And then we're going to say, don't worry about forts, don't worry about air bases, don't worry about the entire coastline. Do worry about victory points and do worry about naval bases. And it will tell us how many divisions he expects to require to do this order. So this is basically saying station a division everywhere where there's a port, which is one of these, and everywhere where there's a victory point, which is one of these. So Adelaide is both a port and a victory point. There might be some, for example Newcastle, which is just a victory point, but I still want it defended. The ports in particular though, the ports are the big one. If an enemy attacks and they don't control a port, they can't get supplies, they will eventually attrition to death. Whereas if you're attacking somewhere with a port and you take the port, you get supplies coming in, that is then a legitimate invasion, and that's a big problem. So we want to make sure we hold on to the ports. If someone lands like in here, who cares? Just let them attrition. It's frickin' Australia. But if they take the ports, we have an issue. Can you rename generals? Unfortunately not. Sleep is for the communists, the Enclave probably. Yeah, Australia is going to have a fairly slow start, but I think that's going to be true for basically all of the Commonwealth countries, with the exception of Britain. And something which I really like about multiplayer playing as the UK, like I enjoy playing the UK, is you can send, this is more advanced, so if you're a beginner to this game, don't worry about what I'm saying right now. And this is also multiplayer only. You can send expeditionaries to the other countries, so you can basically say to your Australia player, or actually probably to the New Zealand player, you are responsible for all forces in this area, and then you can send them an expeditionary, so even though you're using British manpower and British industry, the Australian player is then concentrating on this area of the world. South Africa can take over the Africa sphere. Canada can take over naval well, actually not really. The British player has to do naval because he can't expeditionary navies, which is a bit annoying. Because I would love to be able to give the Australians like the Australia Expeditionary Fleet. Canada could do air, or actually probably better, Australia can do air. So yeah, that's one of the things that I like about playing as the Allies, is you can just give other players operational oversight in different areas. Okay, so I think that we are almost ready to actually unpause. We've assigned General... Oh, Navy. We haven't actually done anything with the Navy. So if we click up here, this is the easiest way of getting an overview of what fleets you have. We currently have just one, which is the Australia Squadron. It consists of 2 heavy cruisers, which are these 2. They are both low level, they're just tier 1. We have a Sydney-class light cruiser, which is one of those excellent light cruisers that we were just talking about. We have a tier 1 light cruiser, so it's not as good, and if you click on the actual icon and then click on design, we can see how it's equipped. That is a garbage ship. This has basically nothing going for it. It has a gun, has an engine, has some armor. That's it. It doesn't have recon from the float planes, as we saw earlier. It has no form of anti-air, has no sonar or radar, and it has no special modules. That is a terrible boat. And then we also have the VW class destroyers, which again we can click on the design. This is just a very versatile, solid design. That's pretty good. And then we have one S-class destroyer, which lacks AA. Yeah. Wait, did it have depth charges? It has depth charges. So it's very similar to the VW, but it's not as good. And in fact, what we can do is say we want to turn the S-class into a VW. And we can do that with this button here. So if there is another ship of the same tier with a different name, then you can say upgrade, and then you can basically turn it into one of the other modules. This will come with a small cost, although 174 is basically nothing, and this is increasing the anti-air of that S-class and will turn it into a VW. The times you do not want to do this is if the engine is changing or if the armor is changing, in which case the refitting cost is about the same as building a new ship. So if your engine was a tier 1 and you're trying to make it a tier 2, just don't. Just don't. And likewise with the armor. So if it's just weapons changing, if it's just radar changing, if it's adding depth charges, that's fine. You absolutely can refit. And we're going to do that. So this boat is now going to go into port. In fact, it starts in port, so it should appear here. We're going to drag you to the top and say that's going to be the priority. Refit this and then start working on the Sydney class. The other thing we need to do is assign you a commander. And we have 2 people for this. So we have Victor Crunchley, who is actually quite good. But I think Farncombe's... maybe not. So the reason I immediately went, ooh, I like that, is because he has the bold trait. Bold is probably one of the best naval traits you can have. It increases their speed, which is important for catching enemies and running away from enemies. Both of them very important in naval warfare, trust me. And it increases their damage by 5%. Crutchley would be a good submarine commander, like Helfrich has bold as well. But he is generally just all-round good. Then we've also got Harold Farcombe. He is an aviation enthusiast, so if we had carriers, or if we even had any hope of building a carrier, which we don't, really, he would be good for that. He would get more carrier experience faster. He's also naval lineage, which, if you're playing as somebody as like the UK, who has a massive fleet and doesn't expect to run away, it can be good. The problem is, if you're a very small navy, like Australia, where you're going to be up against somebody like Japan, who has a huge navy, you're going to want to run away if their main battle fleet shows up. Like, you're not going to be fighting that head on. You will just lose. And if this guy's in charge, he's going to be like, no, we can beat these guys. Oh, sorry, guy. I just lost your entire navy. You're going to need to spend another 4 years rebuilding it all. So Farcombe, terrible admiral for somebody like Australia. Crutchley, freaking fantastic. So we'll put Crutchley in charge. I do go into a lot more detail about how naval works, and I think honestly it's much easier to say go check out my naval tutorial, because that is dedicated to navies and how they function and everything. I'll probably get into that a little bit more in depth when we actually need to use the navy, but for the time being I'm just going to say go watch the naval tutorial. It'll serve that purpose a lot better. Mods, if we can get a link to that, I think it's just !naval. Thank you. Thank you, Kalinas. And go and check that out. If you're on YouTube, Google Mordred Viking naval tutorial. It should be, I think, the first hit. Right. Yeah, I think we're ready. We've done all we can with Australia. Time to start a new game. Nah, just kidding. We can now unpause. So this game is pausable real time. It's kind of similar to like Baldur's Gate in that. In that, time will pass unless you pause. We've just bumped up the speed to speed 5 because there is not going to be a lot happening except for research. Then we can just press space and time starts zooming by. You'll notice our armies will start moving into their designated locations. They're actually defending all the ports and the victory points as we ordered them to. Our command power is ticking up. Again, we are waiting until our command power hits 30, and then we can assign the field marshal. And we are also waiting for the focus to finish. These usually take about 70 days. And we're also waiting for the technology to finish. Hearts of Iron, just like Baldur's Gate. It's similar in that it's pausable real time. This is different from other turn-based games, which is more the usual thing for World War II games, where you take a move, you end your turn, all the moves are calculated, you take a move, you end your turn, all moves are calculated. Instead, this is everything happens at once. Look more like an RTS. Crutchley was Jutland, where Roger Keyes decided he was a good officer and nominated him for the Zeebrugge raid, where he got the DSC. Served the Ostend raid, where he earned the Victoria Cross. Nice. So which NPC is Australia? Minsk. Minsk will be free. I don't know, that's a good question actually. What NPC would Australia be? I would say that something like Czechoslovakia would be Minsk. Or Poland. The plucky underdog who comes swinging way harder than you expect them to. Remilitarization of the Rhineland. Germany has stationed troops in the Rhineland territory, close to the French border in clear violation of the Treaty of Versailles. The local population cheered the German soldiers on, while the diplomatic reactions from France and Britain have so far been muted. It is no more the Germans walking into their own backyard, a political commentator in Britain observed. Worrying. Standard gauge railway, done. So now we can work on the Industries Assistance Corporation. We will need both of these in order to get the Western Australian Government railways. However, before we do this, something to consider. This will give us a 100% bonus for industry. That will complete in 70 days. We might want to get construction, then leap immediately to construction 2. Mechanical engineering finishes in 4 days. That finishes in 92 days. So what we probably want to do... Actually, this really doesn't matter. because we won't have got the focus yet. Yep, yeah, okay, we can do this. So we're going to get Industries Assistance Corporation. Now the reason I'm thinking about this is because it will apply to any technology in the industry tree. So even if we want it to apply to construction, if we click industry before that and we have that bonus, it will apply to this industry. There is no way of saying, please use this bonus here. It's just whichever one you pick first. So I needed to check the timing there to make sure that we would be able to get the 1937 industry construction with that focus, and we should be able to. So we just got electronic mechanical engineering, and in fact you want to get mechanical computing, which is another 4% research bonus. So it was a moot point anyway. Is there a reason why I built infrastructure first instead of civilian factories? Yes, and that is actually a very good question. It's one I get asked very frequently. So, if we take a look at our laws and government, we see that we have the civilian economy at the moment. And you will also notice that this comes with a 30% production speed penalty to civilian factories. That is a very, very big penalty. You will also notice that there is something here which is not listed. Infrastructure. Infrastructure, and actually notably dockyards, do not have a construction speed penalty. The other thing, which isn't really explained anywhere, is that infrastructure will increase the speed of buildings in that area. So for every level of infrastructure you have, that is a 10% bonus to construction speed. So if we're building infrastructure while it has no penalty, we are basically going to make it easier to build industry in the future. So once Queensland is complete, for example, it's going to have an 80% construction speed bonus to anything else we build in Queensland. This is one of the reasons we were looking for free building slots. So we want to build up the infrastructure here with the intention of upgrading from civilian economy to something else soon. And then once we do that, the civilian factory construction speed penalty decreases. That's when we start building civilian factories. It's just more efficient. If you're playing as somebody who's going to get into war sooner, France, Germany in particular, then you might well want to just kind of eat that penalty and just build factories straight away. But if you're someone like Australia who's not really going to get threatened until, what, 1941 at the earliest, you should be okay. Another one that's a really good candidate for that is the UK. Just build up your infrastructure and then basically plan for the late war. How much bonus do you get for level 10 infrastructure? 100%. It's 10% per level. Italy took one state. Ethiopia has been annexed. 26th of March. That's actually one of the earliest Ethiopia conquests I've seen. Well done, AI. And we can get an electronics developer. Electronics, since encryption decryption no longer exists as a technology, is just not that useful, which is unfortunate because this was probably one of Australia's really big bonuses. Same as the Netherlands, like they get the Philips industrial concern, which would allow you to go like 4 years ahead of time in research and encryption decryption. Now it's just research, it just doesn't seem worth the cost. And for the record, most things will cost 150 political power. Oh yeah, the other thing that we need to take a look at are decisions. So decisions are this button up here, looks like the gavel. And there are various things. So some countries will have things which are unique to them. So for example, we have prospect for resources. Our geologists have found a number of promising resource deposits within our territories. We can spend some capital to develop these fields. Advances in extraction technology might make these deposits viable for exploration and exploitation. So if we have excavation 3, then we can use 3 civilian factories for 90 days, and we'll start developing aluminium in Tasmania. That could actually be very good, because aluminium is required for aircraft. What do we do really well? Aircraft. So exploiting those bauxite deposits in Tasmania could be a very, very good move once we have extraction 3. And there will be other resources potentially becoming available in the future. Is this my first time playing Hearts of Iron 4? No. Then what else are we saying? Improved worker conditions is another one which can be an interesting one. This will give you a consumer goods factory penalty. It's early game, we still have the Great Depression, that's not a big issue for us, and it will boost up our stability by 0.5 a week. And again, the factory output, early game, not important. It could be good to do worker conditions, just to build up our stability as much as possible. Now, Great Depression will actually bring it up to 94. And this is active for 180 days. Let me just see how much we get, because we'll probably waste stability if we do this. 90 divided by 7, because everything is in weeks. That's 12.8, so if we multiply 0.5, we get 6 stability, which is actually perfect. That would be exactly 100. Will we get stability from any focuses? Classify aliens will reduce stability. That increases stability by 5. In fact, investing in victory is pretty strong. Can you move out the way? I don't want a tooltip there. Go away! I'm trying to read stuff! Okay, that's a bug. I can't deselect this. What's under this? Ah, no. Yeah, there we go. It left. That's a 5%. That's a 10%. We're not going to... Actually, that just gets rid of Great Depression. Or reduces it anyway. So yeah, investing in victory will get us 10 stability. We don't need worker conditions. It's always a good idea to check those things. I'd be curious to know how many hours I have in this game. 1,684. So yes, not a beginner. Novice. With 1,600 hours, I'd say I'm a novice. Why do officers sometimes have the ability to have 72 divisions while under their command? Good question. So, eagle-eyed viewers amongst you may have noticed that this guy can actually command 72 troops instead of the 24, which is what I said earlier. If they are doing the garrison command, which is specifically this, the area defense, then they can have 72 troops. If they're not doing this, then they can have 24. Unless they have the skilled staffer trait, which will increase the number of troops they can command. So basically, if they're doing the area defense, their usual army size is tripled. So if they have skilled staffer, they can actually command up to 90 troops, which is quite nice. And that's the same with expert delegator. So ordinarily a field marshal, an army group would consist of 5 armies. If you're an expert delegator, you can have up to 7 armies. And in fact, speaking of, we have the command power. We are now going to promote Leslie Morshead to a field marshal. And then we're going to assign him as the field marshal of the army group. Now, we'll notice he has a new trait. Recently promoted, -1 to all stats. All of his stats have just gone down. That is temporary. It will go away in 100 days, which should be well in time for him to actually be useful. He now also has access to the field marshal traits. So only field marshals are able to get these. So we could take offensive doctrine, defensive doctrine, organization first, and charismatic. One of these two can be a good choice, and in fact probably is.